Hello, my friends. Think about the last time you truly enjoyed a meal. Maybe it was at home with your family, someone's birthday, a Sunday dinner. Maybe it was in a restaurant with a warm fireplace in the corner. Or maybe it was outside, food cooked over an open fire with friends, smoke in the air, everyone a little hungry, everyone a little happy. There is something about food and fire together, something that feels older than memory, older than language, something that feels like home. Today we are going to find out why, because the story of cooking is not just about food, it is about how we became who we are. You are with me on Custom Stories in English. Find a comfortable spot and let the story begin. 1,000,000 years ago, a forest burned in Africa. No one knows how it started. Maybe lightning struck a dry tree. Maybe lava crept down from a distant volcano. The animals ran. The birds disappeared into the smoke. The sky turned orange, then gray, then black. And then, slowly, the fire died. The forest was silent. The ground was warm and dark with ash. And then something moved. A small creature stepped through the ash. Not quite human, not quite anything we would recognize today. It walked on two legs. It had hands. It was hungry. It bent down and picked something up from the ground. A piece of meat. The fire had touched it, changed it, made it soft and warm and completely different from anything this creature had ever eaten before. It took a bite. Can you imagine that moment? One small creature, one quiet burned forest, one bite of warm meat. And yet, that moment changed everything. It changed our bodies. It changed our minds. It would eventually build our cities, our languages, our families. It brought us here together today. Here is something most people don't know. Before cooking, our ancestors spent up to 6 hours every day just chewing. 6 hours. Like chimpanzees do today. Tough, raw plants, raw meat, hard seeds. Chewing was basically a full-time job. Cooking didn't just change what we ate, it gave us back our time. And we used that time to think, to talk, to create. This is where the story of cooking begins. For a long time, scientists asked a simple question. Why are humans so different from other animals? We are not the strongest creatures on Earth. We are not the fastest. We don't have claws or fangs or thick fur to protect us. A lion would destroy us in seconds. A chimpanzee is 3 times stronger than a human being. And yet, we built cities. We wrote symphonies. We sent machines to Mars. How? A scientist named Richard Wrangham spent many years looking for the answer. He traveled. He studied. He observed chimpanzees in the wild for months. And he found his answer in a very unexpected place. He found it in fire. Here is what he discovered. When you cook food, something important happens. The heat breaks the food open. It unlocks the nutrients inside. A cooked sweet potato gives your body almost twice as much energy as a raw one. Cooked meat is dramatically easier to digest than raw meat. Your body doesn't have to fight for every calorie. And all that extra energy, it goes somewhere. It goes to the brain. Over thousands and thousands of generations, the ancestors who cooked had more energy for thinking. Their brains grew larger. Their stomachs and teeth became smaller because they no longer needed to chew tough raw food for hours every day. Here is a detail that still astonishes me. The human brain uses 20% of all the energy in your body just for thinking. No other animal comes close to that number. We are the most expensive thinkers on the planet, and we can only afford it because someone 1 million years ago learned to cook. There is one more thing Wrangham discovered that changes how you see human history forever. The oldest known fire ever found is inside a cave in South Africa, Wonderwork Cave. The ash and burned bone there are 1 million years old. The creature who made that fire was not Homo sapiens. It was our ancestor, Homo erectus, a different species, a different world. And yet it already knew something extraordinary. It already knew that fire and food together made life better. We did not invent cooking. We inherited it from a creature that was not even human yet. Fire did something else, something even more powerful than feeding our brains. It brought us together. Think about what happens when you light a fire at night. The light pushes back the darkness. The warmth pushes back the cold. The dangerous animals stay away, and everyone near the fire, they come closer, naturally, without thinking. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, there was a reason to sit still together after dark. And in that stillness, in that warmth, something began. People started talking. Not just warning sounds like other animals, not just signals of danger or hunger, but something new. Stories, questions, jokes. The slow, patient building of language, one word at a time, one fire at a time, over tens of thousands of years. And they started sharing food. This seems like a small thing. It is not. Most animals eat alone, or they fight for food. The strongest animal eats first. The weakest goes hungry. That is the law of nature. But around the fire, something different happened. Food was prepared. It was divided. It was given to children, to elders, to the sick. This is not animal behavior. This is human behavior. Sharing food requires trust. It requires care. It requires the belief that giving something away today does not mean you will go hungry tomorrow. That belief, that trust, is the foundation of every community that has ever existed. The first family dinner happened 1 million years ago. Under an open sky, no table, no chairs, no plates. But the feeling, that feeling of eating together, of belonging, that feeling was already there. Now here is one of the most haunting questions in all of human history. We were not the only ones around the fire. Our closest cousins, the Neanderthals, also used fire, also cooked. They were not primitive. They were strong, intelligent, and adaptable. They survived ice ages that killed countless other species. They buried their dead, which means they understood loss and perhaps grief. They created simple art and jewelry. They were, in many ways, remarkably like us. And yet, they are gone. Every single one of them. We are here. They are not. Scientists have debated this for decades. But one theory is quietly devastating in its simplicity. Homo sapiens gathered around the fire in larger groups. We shared food more widely. We told stories to people outside our immediate family. We built networks of trust across distances. Neanderthals may have eaten more separately, more privately, kept to smaller, more closed groups. A small difference, almost invisible from the outside, but over thousands of years, everything. We are here because we learned to sit together, to share, to tell stories in the dark. And you are doing exactly that right now. For most of human history, we moved. We followed the animals. We followed the seasons. We carried everything we owned. Home was wherever the fire was tonight. The idea of staying in one place, of building something permanent, that was not how life worked. But around 10,000 years ago, something changed. We learned to store food. Grain was the key. Wheat and barley in the Middle East, rice in China, corn in the Americas. When grain is dry, it can last for months, for years. For the first time in human history, people could eat today what they had grown 3 months ago. They did not need to follow the animals anymore. They could stay. And when they stayed, they built. Here is something that surprised me when I first learned it. The first cities were not built around markets, not around temples, not around palaces or kings. They were built around storage. The oldest urban centers ever found, places like Uruk in ancient Iraq, over 5,000 years old, have enormous storehouses at their very center. Not thrones, not altars, grain storage. Food was the foundation. Power came after. But grain alone was not enough. Meat went bad. Fish went bad. Vegetables rotted before anyone could eat them. How do you feed a growing city when half your food disappears before it reaches the table? The answer was salt. Salt pulls water out of food, and without water, bacteria cannot grow. A piece of salted fish that would rot in 2 days could suddenly last for months. Salt made armies possible. Soldiers could carry food across long campaigns. Salt made trade routes possible. Preserved food could travel vast distances. Salt made winter survivable in cold northern lands. Whoever controlled the salt controlled survival itself. And here is a detail I love. The English word salary, the money you receive for your work, comes from the Latin word salarium. In ancient Rome, soldiers were sometimes paid in salt or given money specifically to buy it. Salt was that valuable, that essential. Every time someone talks about their salary today, they are speaking a word built on salt, on hunger, on the ancient, desperate need to keep food from disappearing. But there is one more city I want to tell you about. The city of Salzburg in Austria, one of the most beautiful cities in Europe, the birthplace of Mozart, a place of music and mountains and extraordinary architecture. Its name in German means simply salt castle, an entire magnificent city named after a mineral we now shake onto our food without a second thought. That is how important salt once was. And while grain and salt were changing the world above ground, something else was happening quietly in the dark. Something invisible. Something that would give us bread and wine and cheese and chocolate. Something that would change everything again. There is a revolution happening right now in your kitchen. You cannot see it, you cannot hear it, but it is there. Tiny living things, bacteria, yeasts, molds, are working slowly and patiently in the dark, transforming food, changing it into something completely different from what it was before. This process is called fermentation, and it is one of the oldest and most powerful cooking technologies in human history. Think about what fermentation gives us: bread, cheese, wine, beer, yogurt, soy sauce, fish sauce, pickles, chocolate, coffee. Every single one of these foods exists because of fermentation, because of those invisible living things working quietly where no one can see them. But here is where the story gets strange. Beer may be older than bread. Some scientists now believe that the first reason humans began growing grain, the very reason we settled down, built cities, changed civilization forever, was not to make flour and bake. It was to make beer. The earliest grain storage sites we have found show patterns that look more like brewing than baking. The chemistry of the oldest vessels suggests fermented drinks, not bread dough. And why did they want beer so much? Because water was dangerous. In the ancient world, rivers and lakes were full of bacteria that could make you violently sick. There were no filters, no treatment, no way to know if the water was safe. But beer, the alcohol in beer, kills those bacteria. Weak beer was safer than river water. People drank it every day. Children drank it. Elderly people drank it. Western civilization, in a very real sense, was built on fermented drinks being safer than water. Now here is something the original story doesn't tell you. In Korea, around 2,000 years ago, people faced a problem. Winter was long and brutal. Fresh vegetables disappeared for months. People needed a way to survive until spring. So they took cabbage. They packed it with salt and spices. They buried it underground in clay pots where the temperature stayed cold and steady, and the bacteria did the rest. What came out of those clay pots months later was kimchi. Today, it is eaten by millions of people every single day. It is on restaurant tables in New York and Paris and Tokyo. Korean grandmothers still make it every autumn in a tradition called kimjang, the whole family gathering together to prepare hundreds of jars before winter comes. A survival technique from 2,000 years ago became a cultural celebration that UNESCO added to its list of intangible human heritage. Fermentation saved them from hunger, and then it became who they are. And this is perhaps the most beautiful thing about fermentation. It gives food a sense of place that nothing else can. A sourdough bread made in San Francisco has a completely different flavor than one made in Paris, not because of the recipe, not because of the flour, but because the bacteria floating in the air of San Francisco are different from the bacteria floating in the air of Paris. Every city has its own invisible fingerprint. Every region has its own invisible flavor. In a world where almost everything is becoming the same fast food chains, the same supermarkets, the same flavors everywhere, fermented foods still carry something irreplaceable. They still taste like somewhere specific, like someone specific, like a particular grandmother's hands, a particular valley's air, a particular people's long memory. They still remember. Cooking gave us everything: our brains, our language, our communities, our cities, our culture. Everything we have explored in this story, all of it, came from the simple act of transforming raw food with heat and time and patience. And yet, the people who cooked were almost never the people with power. In almost every society we know of, throughout almost all of human history, the work of cooking was given to those at the bottom, to women, to servants, to enslaved people, to the poor. The more powerful you were, the less you cooked. And the more elaborate your food became, not as nourishment, but as display. A king's feast showed his power, his wealth, his dominance. Hundreds of dishes, exotic ingredients from distant lands, elaborate presentations that took days to prepare. But no one asked who had been in the kitchen for those 3 days. The cooks were invisible. The food was everything. Here is a story that stays with me. In ancient Rome, there was a man named Apicius. He was not a king or a general or a philosopher. He was a cook. Or, more precisely, he was obsessed with food. He spent an enormous fortune searching for the most extraordinary ingredients and flavors the ancient world had to offer. He reportedly sent ships to distant shores just to find a particular type of shrimp. He created dishes so complex that recreating them today requires teams of professional chefs. And when his money finally ran out, when he calculated that what remained was not enough to maintain the life of luxury he considered necessary, he poisoned himself rather than live without extraordinary food. He left behind a cookbook, the oldest cookbook that has survived to this day, written almost 2,000 years ago. His name was Marcus Gavius Apicius, and almost nobody knows who he was. But the invisible people, the ones with no name, no power, no choice, they left their mark anyway. In the American South, enslaved Africans were often the most skilled cooks on the plantations where they were forced to live and work. They brought knowledge from West Africa that their enslavers did not have and could not replicate. Techniques for cooking rice that came from generations of cultivation along the rivers of Senegal and Sierra Leone. Methods for smoking meat that transformed cheap cuts into something extraordinary. The knowledge of how to use every single part of an animal, nothing wasted, everything honored. They adapted, they created, they cooked under impossible conditions with whatever they were given. And the food they made, born from suffering, built from genius, became the foundation of what the world now calls Southern American cuisine. Barbecue, soul food, dishes celebrated in restaurants across the world, featured in cookbooks, praised by critics, built on knowledge that was never credited, from hands that were never thanked. The food survived, the names were erased. And there is one more connection across time that I cannot stop thinking about. The Romans had a fish sauce called garum. It was made from fish packed in salt, left to slowly liquefy in the sun for weeks. It was pungent. It was dark. It was intensely, almost overwhelmingly flavorful. And it was in almost every Roman recipe, the way olive oil or butter might be today, the foundation of an entire cuisine. The Roman Empire fell 1,500 years ago. Its roads crumbled, its language transformed into a dozen different ones. Its gods were forgotten. But garum did not die. The technique crossed oceans. It found new fish in new waters, new climates, new hands that had never heard of Rome and never would. Today, Vietnamese nuoc cham fish sauce is made by almost exactly the same method. Salt, fish, time. The same patient, invisible transformation, 2,000 years apart. Two civilizations that never met. One ancient idea, quietly alive in both. The most powerful things in human history are sometimes the ones nobody noticed. In 1809, a Frenchman named Nicolas Appert made a discovery that changed the world. He placed cooked food into glass jars. He sealed them tightly. He placed them in boiling water, and the food inside stayed safe for months, without salt, without fermentation, without any of the ancient methods humans had used for thousands of years. He did not know why it worked. He simply knew that it did. That discovery became canning. Canning became refrigeration. Refrigeration became factory farming. Factory farming became industrial processing. Industrial processing became fast food. Fast food became delivery apps. Each step made food cheaper, more available, more convenient. And each step took us a little further from the fire. Here is a number that stops me every time I think about it. In 1900, a family in the United States spent roughly 45% of their income on food. Today, that number is around 10%. For hundreds of millions of people, hunger is no longer a daily fear. Children are growing up in a world where food is simply there, always, without effort, without thought. That is a genuine miracle. A real one. We should not forget that. But something else happened alongside that miracle. Quietly, slowly, almost without anyone noticing. We forgot how to cook. Not all of us, not everywhere, but in many parts of the world, the knowledge that had been passed from mother to daughter, from father to son, from grandmother to grandchild for 10,000 years, that knowledge began to disappear. We buy food that is already prepared. We heat things that are already cooked. We eat alone in front of screens, in cars, walking down streets, barely tasting what we consume. And here is something that research is now beginning to show us. The countries where people still cook together, where the kitchen is still the center of the home, where meals are still long and loud and shared, Those countries consistently report higher levels of happiness, stronger family bonds, longer lives. Japan, Italy, Greece, Mexico. These are not accidents. The fire that brought us together 1 million years ago is still trying to burn. We just keep walking away from it. But here is what I believe. It is not gone. Not yet. Not completely. Every time someone cooks a meal for another person, something ancient wakes up. Every time a family sits together at a table, phones put away, food in the middle, everyone a little hungry, everyone a little present. The campfire is still there. Every time a grandparent teaches a grandchild how to make a dish from memory, without a recipe, just hands and instinct and love, a thread connects us all the way back to that creature in the ash 1 million years ago, taking the very first bite. We are still that creature. We are still around the fire. We just have to remember to come back to it. And you, my friend, you are on your own journey right now. Learning English is like learning to cook. At first, the ingredients feel strange. The words don't come easily. The sentences don't taste right. You make mistakes. Something burns. You try again. You sit with the difficulty and you don't walk away. That is exactly what our ancestors did 1 million years ago. They did not walk away from the fire. They stayed. They learned. They passed the knowledge on. Every sentence you understand today, that is your fire. Every story you follow all the way to the end, that is your meal. You are feeding your mind something warm and real. And just like cooking, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes, the more yours it becomes. Keep going, my friend. The fire is yours.